one of the most fascinating things that I heard from people who would not support 127 is because of the botched reintroduction of wolves. And the notion of ballot box biology, I know the folks who supported 127 hate that, but when you put decisions about wildlife into the hands of voters, instead of the people who have the training experience, i.e. our parks and wildlife biologists, this time the backlash was immediate.
It is the morning after the day of. We're recording this right after the election. Still, a lot of results in Colorado haven't come in, so the one and only Marianne Goodland is going to get us through that. But first, subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon, get notifications, and find Devil's Advocate podcast in all the usual places. So, Marianne, how late were you up last night?
Actually, not all that late. My responsibilities last night pretty much pertained just to the legislative races. By 9 o'clock, I had a pretty good feel for what was going on and what we were going to have to sit up all night watching for. So I actually made it to bed at a decent hour.
So you were the one.
I'm the only one, yes.
That's why everyone else is dragging. I tell you what, let's start from the top and work our way down.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on Trump. I want to get to Colorado stuff, but how did the Trump mandate surprise you? The scale of the victory? It
did. I had told people that I thought Harris had a chance at it, but once I started to see the way some of the things were going, particularly in the early returns, what surprised me was him winning all 7 battleground states. That was a surprise. I thought Michigan would hold, and I thought Wisconsin might hold, but I started hearing things going on in some of the counties like Wausau County, just outside of Milwaukee, and how well he was doing compared to what he did in 2020. And I thought, this is going his way.
Easily, I think, the greatest political comeback in American history.
Oh, yeah.
Bringing it to Colorado, you realize that Colorado signed on to that silly national popular vote compact.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but be delighted with the fantasy that if that was actually in place right now, which the voters did not repeal, the legislature put in, that our delegates of the Electoral College would be forced to vote for Trump. All of California's would have to vote for Trump. So I'm wondering how people who support the national popular vote would feel about their Colorado electors having to vote for Trump. I don't think they would sit very well.
I think you're probably right about that. That would probably give a lot of folks a lot of heartburn.
Yes, so they ought to think about that at the beginning of the next session if that's really what they want to keep doing. All right, let's bring it to the state. For me, I thought the 800-pound gorilla on the ballot was Prop 131.
Absolutely.
Ranked choice voting with a jungle primary. My prediction was this thing would pass. I mean, they had the money, it sounded good, they had the endorsements, they were everywhere, it polled pretty well, and it got stomped.
And I heard the same thing. Everybody I was talking to was saying this is going to pass. I moderated a debate where overwhelmingly people were in favor of ranked choice voting. But I started hearing maybe a week or so before the election that things were not going in the right direction for that ballot measure. And if you look at all the other, this was on a lot of ballots. You had Alaska, which wanted to repeal it. They repealed it. There were a bunch of other states that had ranked choice voting. Every single one of them said no. Every one of them. Which was
that is amazing.
That is amazing to me. Missouri actually had a measure to prohibit ranked choice voting. That passed.
Really? Mm-hmm. What do you think that says?
That people are not ready to take that big of a step on something that isn't 100% clear to them what they're doing.
My takeaway is that too often proponents of initiatives, and I've been guilty of this myself, put something on the ballot that is just too far. Coloradans don't like disruptive policy change. They like incremental policy change.
This would have been a very big one.
This would have
because
been a huge disruption.
And not just the ranked choice voting, but the open primaries. That to me was would have been even more complicated, I think, for voters than what would happen in the general election. You get, and I've heard this from folks in other states, you get a ballot that's got like 30 names on it from all various different parties. And that to me throws a bit of a monkey wrench into
Although we
things.
do that in Denver, we do it in other cities for mayor, other positions. So we've seen 17 people run for mayor, and then there's a runoff. My thinking was if that 131 was chopped into two, one a jungle primary, that could very well pass, because my sense is Coloradans hate the extremes of both parties. They are sick of both of them. Unaffiliators are now 50% of the voting bloc. And then a couple of years later down the road, once they're used to that, maybe they go to ranked choice voting or approval voting or something different.
Right.
But it kind of like what we did with mail-in balloting. First there was absentees, and then permanent absentees, and then some mail-in, and then
Right.
you know, everybody wants everything right away in politics, and that doesn't always work.
That was just too big a bite that voters weren't ready for.
Do you think it comes back?
It wouldn't surprise me. I know that Kent Theory has his Unite America, and they're still. I expect that they will keep pushing this. Maybe not in Colorado, maybe someplace else.
There's a lot to be learned here. I do like the idea of an open primary. I never thought I would, but we've got to do something to get some normal people running in office and at least give them a shot, because I think on both sides it's getting too crazy, and it's one of the reasons Colorado goes so left is that there's not a reasonable liberal to vote for. It's the progressive communist who always wins in a lot of these seats, and that's that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know that we'll see that come back anytime soon, but it wouldn't surprise me, and maybe he'll go for breaking it up into and chunking it up into smaller parts and trying it that way.
Well, he's certainly passionate about it. My conversations with him, you can tell he is motivated on this.
Absolutely.
Speaking about being motivated and trying to bite off too much, it was Amendment 80, or was it Prop 80? I forget. Amendment 80.
Choice?
School choice. I asked them not to put this on the ballot. I asked them to pull it off the ballot. I saw this as a high-risk, low-reward type of initiative that would likely fail. And my worry is, if it failed, which it did, then the legislature, which hates charter schools now, will take that as a directorate from the masses. Oh, well, we really should go forward with our plans to defund charters.
I got to push back on you on the charter schools. You have a lot of Democrats who are very supportive of charter schools. The governor started charter schools, and any time that there are efforts in the legislature to do anything that affects the authority of charter schools, it gets shot down by Democrats.
But didn't it get very close last session? Wasn't there? There was a couple bills.
It wasn't close.
Okay, so you feel that it's going to be okay?
Charter schools are fine. I don't see any effort whatsoever to try and undo the laws around charter schools. Where I think
I see a lot of efforts to put more mandates on charter schools.
Absolutely.
And take away their authorities.
Yes, but those have not been successful. And frankly, where the protections for that comes from are from moderate Democrats. And surprisingly enough, a lot of folks who've been involved in school school administration, teaching, that kind of stuff, they have remained supportive of charter schools. Those who don't have never been able to quite get enough momentum to get that even passed in the legislature, much less getting changes to school choice at the state level. The biggest problem that I saw with Amendment 80 was that the campaign was so deceptive. You had and that just fired up the opposition. And it really,
how was it deceptive?
They kept implying that people like the president of the Colorado Education Association and other people supported school choice, and then they said, they support school choice, you should vote for this, which was no. They've got campaign finance complaints all over the place right now over the fact that these were deceptive ads. They failed to have the disclaimers on there paid for by that you have to have on anything. And it just ginned up the opposition probably more than it would have had they been a little bit more honest about what they were doing.
Also, it was created in a silo. You know, at Independence Institute, we've been at the forefront of educational choice for nearly 4 decades. And there's a group of education reformers out there, including us, who had no idea this was being cooked up. So the Christian homeschool educators, Ready, Colorado, Steve Schuck, the father of school choice, had no idea any of this was going on until it pops up one day and it's going to be on the ballot. My hope is that the people who put money behind it now put up money to protect school choice. You feel that it's going to be okay, but I worry about what can happen in a legislative session, especially now that they still have a strong supermajority in the House.
But the people who are going to be the most supportive of making changes on charter schools, their numbers are not as great as they were in the 23 and 24 session. You saw a lot of those progressives go by the wayside during the primaries.
The one that surprised me, not as much as 131, the one that surprised me was the trophy hunting. Oh my God, I thought that was a slam dunk after we saw what happened with wolf reintroduction. We saw, of course, the sales tax for guns. We knew that was going to pass.
Yeah, that was.
And so I thought this would just fit in with that narrative. What happened there? I'm thrilled. Don't get me wrong. I just don't quite understand it.
Actually, what happened is wolves.
Tell me about that.
One of the most fascinating things that I heard from people who would not support 127 is because of the botched reintroduction of wolves. And the notion of ballot box biology, I know the folks who supported 127 hate that, but when you put decisions about wildlife into the hands of voters, instead of the people who have the training experience, i.e. our parks and wildlife biologists, this time the backlash was immediate. And even people that didn't like it really thought it had a good chance of passing. I was talking to a couple of folks on the Western Slope about this, and they were just convinced this thing was going to fly. As of Wednesday, when we're taping this, the measure was down 267,000 votes. That's a slam dunk. That's 10% right there.
It shocked me, and it makes me wonder if people regret the wolf decision.
That is exactly why I think a lot of people voted against 127, because they had regrets. If you look at the state map for where this thing passed, it only passed in 3 counties. 3 large counties and 2 very,
Denver,
very
Boulder,
small. Arapahoe.
And Arapahoe.
And then 2 very small counties on the Western Slope, San Juan and San Miguel. But when you compare it to where wolves passed in 2020, you had places like Pitkin County, Eagle County, some of the larger Western Slope, sort of what I would call blue counties. They didn't even vote for this, but they're right on the edge of where those wolves are right now.
That's the idea of the urban center, Boulder, Denver, voting to put killer animals in somebody else's backyard. I just find that the height of urban arrogance, that we know what's best for you who live in the world of livestock. It's just ridiculous. I hope this might be a signal that maybe that urban-rural war is calming down a little bit. Similarly, not on the same level, but the slaughterhouse ban in Denver and the fur ban in Denver. I thought the slaughterhouse thing would go down. I thought the fur thing would pass. That's shocked me too.
Didn't surprise me
Why is that?
In the slightest.
Because you like furs? Because of your great fur collection?
Of course.
Your mink? On your salary, all the minks you get?
Oh, yeah. Right. I guarantee you Mr. Anschutz does not pay me that well. But it actually didn't surprise me, because I think those things were inextricably linked in voters' minds. If you voted against one, you were going to vote against the other, for one thing. It's just easier then. But you look at the opposition to 308, which was the fur, and it was fly fishing and the National Western Stock Show. And where the National Western Stock Show carries a lot of weight in Denver. The city and the state have put an awful lot of money into propping up the National Western so it doesn't wind up going off to Oklahoma, as one of the governors down there wanted to move it down there. So if the National Western's fussing about it, people are gonna think twice. The slaughterhouse thing, that was an easy one. That one you knew was going to fail and fail big, and it failed on almost a 2-to-1 margin, as based on these sort of unofficial results. Denver Democrats came out against it. Unions came out against it. Everybody came out against it.
It was an anti-working man initiative.
Yep.
Again, it had that aroma of urban elitism. We shouldn't be killing lambs. You need to be a vegan. We should make it harder for you. But in reality, not only do people work in that slaughterhouse, they feed states. I mean, people eat because of their work. It was really, I thought, an initiative of great arrogance.
You don't. The thing that I found intriguing about this, and frankly kind of troubling, was that you don't write a ballot measure to target one business.
Right.
That you don't get away with doing that.
Oh, you do, and sometimes it has happened.
Well, you shouldn't. Let's just put it that way. In the legislature, you would hear mighty screaming if you wrote a bill that benefited or targeted one particular business. You can't do that. I mean, that's against the law.
Really? Then talk to me about the firearms tax. I'm not very comfortable having my constitutional rights taxed, but that was one industry and it was taxed.
That's one industry. It's not the same thing as one business, one particular business, which is what Superior Farms, that's the only business that would have been impacted by it. And the proponents were not shy about going after Superior Farms on this.
What shocked me, or I guess what disappoints me about the gun tax, not only because I believe constitutional rights shouldn't be taxed, is that some of the money goes for victim services. And as a gun owner, we get really tired of being punished as if we're the bad guy, when we're not the bad guy. And so now you're punishing good guys. You're not punishing the bad guys to make restitution. You're not forcing them to pay more. You're forcing the people who are legal and safe to have guns. And again, it's just, it reeks of that urban suburban elitism that doesn't quite understand the gun culture or guns.
And that was, excuse me, that was the big knock against that ballot measure, is that responsible and lawful gun owners were paying for crime victims services that they had nothing to do with.
There really wasn't much opposition to it because it just seemed the political reality is that was going to pass.
Very little.
The new Colorado.
Yeah.
Speaking of law and order, let me run by the two law and order initiatives. I'm not surprised that they both passed handily.
Me neither.
On the first one, let's go with the $300 million or $350 million from the state to local police. I had real mixed feelings about this. I want more money for cops. That's terrific. But I don't want to emulate that federal model where DC gets to decide, who gets what on a local level. The real problem is they didn't write it with a deadline for when that money needed to be spent. So they can kick this can down. The legislature can wait till next year or the year after or the year after or the year after. They can wait until $350 million is eaten away by inflation before they spend it. What do you think happens with this? Will the legislature spend that money in year one?
In year one, doubtful. And the big reason is that they don't have it. They don't have that $350 million. It exists only on paper and on that ballot measure. The governor presented his budget proposal on last Friday, and the first thing out of his mouth was, we're tightening our belts. $350 million is a big ask right now when you're $1 billion, you got $1 billion hole that you have to deal with. This just adds to the hole. I mean, the money has to come from somewhere, but there was nothing in the ballot measure to say this is where it's going to come from. It's just the legislature has got to appropriate this money. I don't know where they're going to get it.
It reminds me of the problem that a lot of people saw with the school choice initiative, that the wording wasn't very tight. It wasn't well thought through.
Nope.
There was no stakeholdering saying, oh, you ought to think about that or this. It was just done in a silo, and out it comes. And yeah, people like it, but it might not have the impact that the backers think it will, because it might not get implemented for years or decades.
Yeah, a little bit too broadly written.
The other one was to say that people who are convicted of violent crimes have to do 85% of their sentence.
Correct.
Knew that would pass easily. I think as well there's going to be some unintended consequences, namely that judges are just not going to make as severe sentencing.
I'm not so sure I agree with that. If the crimes are egregious enough, and this ballot measure is reserved for the most egregious crimes, I think judges still have to go, unless they want to get recalled or not.
Oh no, we're going to go to that next. The untouchable judges. Not a single judge in the entire state lost his retention election.
Even the only one who didn't get recommended for retention.
Yeah. Think about that.
Yeah.
This is outrageous how that branch of government has no accountability, how incestuous it is by choosing its own people to look into their discipline and look into their investigations and even decide who should be nominated for the next judgeship. I mean, it is corrupt. And there were judges who won with 80% yes votes. Mm-hmm. There's no accountability.
Nobody really pays attention to that, though. I mean, I think that's the biggest problem, is that judicial retention is like the redheaded stepchild of elections. You get this long list of judges that you're supposed to say yes or no to. The blue book will only tell you, a limited
tell
amount.
You nothing.
It's a very limited amount of information about that.
But they all basically recommend retention.
Yeah, except for the one that I think was in Garfield County, I think.
Yeah, got 52% of the vote still.
Yeah, still wound up winning. The judicial retention system, I think, is not particularly informative for voters. You don't really have much of a choice. The
initiative, or excuse me, the referred measure to change the disciplinary stuff passed easily. It doesn't have a lot of teeth. It's not a big change.
It's a step.
If
you want to talk about taking incremental steps in order to fix a problem, as we were with ranked choice voting, it's a step.
Getting back to sentencing, 85%.
Yeah.
The other unintended consequence could well be that there'll be less to entice good behavior in jails and prisons. That if you can't earn time off, it might give jailers and parole boards a lot less muscle to encourage the right behavior.
But you are still talking about a very small percentage of the population. And the impacts of this, according to the fiscal analysis, we aren't going to see for 10 years, maybe even 20 years. So, I mean, you are talking about a pretty small population when you talk about the people who are convicted of these very, very heinous crimes. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, you're going to see more attention to different forms of incarceration, different restrictions, perhaps, that will help keep control of that population. That's what Canyon City is for.
It is a statement about people's frustration with crime.
Absolutely.
I think that's really what we saw here. What else am I missing on the initiatives that were important?
I think that covers sort of the big ticket ones.
Then let's get into the juicy stuff.
Yeah.
The legislature is still dominated, not quite as much, by the Democrats. And as we're taping this, you said there's a couple seats that are still...
There are 3 seats in the House that are still too close to call. 2 of them, I think, probably are going to go to the Democrats who are leading in those because of their margins, though we have tens of thousands of ballots that have not yet been processed and counted. The one that I'm watching most carefully, and the one that fascinates me more than any other, House District 50 up in Greeley. This is a 3-term incumbent who is running for her 4th term. She's behind by 37 votes as of Wednesday.
And who is this?
Mary Young, who is the wife of State Treasurer Dave Young. She ran against, and she's had trouble her last two elections, tonight or this year and in 2022. In 2022, she won by 330 votes in a 39% turnout election.
What was the turnout last night? It was pretty high.
62%.
Yeah.
And that's just early numbers, but she lost by 330 votes. There was a Libertarian candidate who took 615, right? So this year, it's a two-person race, Mary Young and Ryan Gonzalez, who is a young man who lives in Greeley. And when the polls closed, the first returns showed her up by 99 votes. And through the night, it just went down, 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 down. The last time that I checked it before I filed my story, she was up by something like 16 votes or 14 votes or something like that. It had gotten very, very narrow, and I thought, this one's going to flip. You could see it coming. The knock against her by the Republicans and the independent expenditure committees was on two things, and you're going to love this. Number one, she said that she personally would support a ban on fracking. In Weld County, oh, mama, that's just not a good idea.
That's what required Priola to switch teams. That's home oil and gas country.
Yeah, it is. That was number one. Number two, support for repealing Tabor. And so, it gave the Republicans, a tailor-made opposition to her candidacy. So, like I said, Ryan Gonzalez is now up by 37 votes, but my sources tell me there were probably 12,000 uncounted ballots. So this one is far from being over. The other two races that we're still keeping an eye on in Colorado Springs, House District 16, which is sort of the central and southern part of Colorado Springs, Stephanie Vigil, who is a first-term lawmaker, was elected first Democrat to ever represent the district 2 years ago. And she had a lead of about 1,600 votes, I think, at the last time that I checked. Still, lots and lots of ballots, thousands of ballots that have not yet been counted. It
looks like the supermajority is likely to hold in the House for Democrats.
Probably,
is that a good, safe thing to say?
I think the House District 50 seat will probably flip. Those other two races, I think they're probably going to hold for the two Democrats.
Not quite as large supermajority, but still a supermajority. Yeah. On the Senate side, Republicans picked up one?
Didn't pick up a single seat, but they kept the supermajority from happening. And the seat that made the difference is Senate District 5, Western Slope, sort of central Western Slope. It was an open seat because the Senator Perry Will decided to run for Garfield County Commission. He won, by the way. And so you had Representative Mark Catlin, who's very popular, very well liked by Democrats, and running against an attorney in Glenwood Springs named Cole Berger. And that race was pretty close until late last night, and then you started to see the gap growing and growing and growing. So
is the number of R's versus D's in the Senate
exactly the same as it was when we started yesterday morning?
Why do we even bother?
Well, but you did have interesting changes.
Well, also Priola's seat switched back.
Flipped back to Republicans, which everybody...
Again, that's also Weld County and Greeley.
That was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Everybody knew that was going to happen. The other seat that flipped was Bob Gardner's seat down in Colorado Springs, went to the Democrat, Mark Snyder, who's a state representative, who's a former mayor of Manitou Springs. He is now going to represent Senate District 12.
Let's grab a couple other elections. Tabor, you said, was the issue in one of the House seats.
Yep.
Tabor took it on the chin in Jefferson County and in Arapahoe County, which I'm not surprised by, but I'm disappointed. You would think that after the huge hike in property taxes and the excess revenue that those two counties took in, voters would be like, yeah, this is a way to get some of that back. I don't think they understood that. And when you read the language, in Jefferson County, the commissioners hired Brittany Patterson's husband to work and get everything set up, including, well, let's label it this way, the ballot language. I read the ballot language. You'd have to be a sadist not to vote for it because it helps children and old ladies and everything else without raising taxes, the same old lie. So 2 times they were able to vote it down, and that's thanks to Natalie Menton out there. This time they couldn't pull it off.
I think the returns show that they did pull it off.
Oh, I mean, from my point of view,
Yeah.
they couldn't stop deep-Brucing.
No. And Jefferson County, and I live in Jefferson County, they've been trying to de-Bruce for years. This is not the first time this issue has come up, but in a year when you had 14 statewide ballot measures, you had multiple ballot measures coming from local jurisdictions. Denver had something like 12, which was just crazy. I mean, I think ballot fatigue meant that a lot of folks maybe weren't paying as much attention to some issues. That Jefferson County one was the very last one on the ballot.
That makes sense. In the same way, how to put it, 131 was the last of all the statewide questions. I wonder how much ballot fatigue after 13 other statewide questions. You go, I just don't understand this.
Especially if you're a person who doesn't pay that much attention to politics, and other than what you see on TV, perhaps from the gazillion ads that they were running. You get down to that last ballot question, and it's like, do I really want to spend the time to learn exactly what this is? Nah, just vote against it. That's what people do. When you start seeing ballot fatigue, and I think we did see a lot of that in some of these things, ranked choice voting for sure, people are just so tired, they're just like, I'm just going to vote against it because I don't understand it, and I really don't want to spend the time to do it.
Let's go to the 8th Congressional. This was the great white hope for Republicans and nationally that Gabe Evans would pull this off.
Yeah.
It was a tight race, but
this one's not over yet. There are still a lot of ballots to be counted. So I'm not calling. I don't think anybody's called that race yet, and I think we just got to sit tight on that one for a couple days.
Bringing this full circle to the open primary question, you said how many people are in. It looks like, and I haven't done the deep dive on it, but there's a Unity Party member who was in there, and I believe it was a approval voting party member there.
Yes, I saw that.
And the two of them together was more than the difference by what Gabe Evans is losing by.
That's right.
Again, just like Kirkmeyer 2 years ago, where the Libertarian easily cost her that seat.
Yep.
That's what we have here.
Yeah. Open primaries, yay.
Well, them open primaries might help with that situation because then you get the top 2 if you had that. The other part of it is we used to have the Green Party. And the Green Party screwed Democrats because they would pull them out, just like Libertarians and the approval voting party is now pulling from the other side. But Democrats just enveloped the Green Party and said, all that crazy regulation on environment, oh yeah, we'll do that for you. And in they came, there was no reason.
Yeah.
I don't see the Republican Party learning that and doing the same thing with Libertarians.
But they did, or at least they tried to this year. As you'll recall, there was a promise, and this did happen up in CD8, where they said, if we subscribe to some of your ideas, you need to promise not to put a candidate on the ballot. And that's exactly what happened in CD8. There was somebody that was planning to run from the Libertarian Party. They pulled out and cleared the way for Gabe Evans and a hope, at least, that he was going to be able to win without that Libertarian on the ballot.
Lauren Boebert won handily.
Yep. Not unexpectedly.
No, it's a, plus 16 Republican district. I wonder, though.
But she lost Douglas County, which I found fascinating.
That is fascinating. And I wonder, after 2 years or 4 years, if the same type of antics she's known for will sour and someone in a primary might take her out.
Which is why I brought up Douglas County. If you're going to find somebody to take her on in a primary in 2 years or 4 years or whatever, it's going to be somebody coming out of Douglas County. It's the most populated county in the district.
In my mind, Deb Flora would have been able to take her out if it was a one-on-one race.
One-on-one, but when it's 1-on-6,
Right. Yeah.
That's what happens.
Why is it that Republicans can't pull it together on these things and say, wait a second, there's 5 of us, and if we all split this vote, we need one of us.
Do you really want me to answer that question? Because I have an answer to it.
I'd love to hear your answer.
Poor leadership at the top of the party.
Say a little more.
You have a Republican Party that it hasn't taken a whole lot of interest in the election this year. They were a non-entity. And it's not like they've been a great entity in the past, but this year was the only thing they cared about was running around protecting kids from bad books, that kind of stuff, or transgender LGBTQ issues, instead of paying attention to their candidates. I heard complaint after complaint that they got nothing from the state party.
And if the state party isn't involved in it, they can't sit down and go, hey, can one of you pull out? Or somebody there? Because
they're not going to listen.
Yeah, there's nothing. What am I getting from you?
Yeah, they're getting nothing.
What was we glossed over the obvious one, but no one's surprised. Abortion rights are now constitutionally protected.
Correct.
Making Colorado, I believe, arguably, the most liberal pro-abortion state in the country, right up to moment of birth.
No, that doesn't happen.
By law, Colorado is the most pro-choice state, and now it's put into the Constitution. You think that's not a fair way to describe it?
Moment of birth I have a problem with, because that's rhetoric that there's no evidence that has ever been allowed.
Reading the now Constitution, it seems pretty clear that up until birth, there's still protections for abortion in this state.
I would be very, very surprised if a situation like that ever took place. Unless there was some humongous fetal abnormality or huge risk to the mother's life.
My simple point is Colorado has the most lenient abortion laws in the country. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
All right, that's all I was saying.
Okay.
Right, and it's interesting that now you had fiscal groups saying, I don't like this. The Independence Institute, which stays clear of abortion, it's not our issue, we don't touch it. We had to say, no, this is a bad idea because it's mandating tax-funded abortions
for state employees and people on Medicaid.
Right. And so this is the first time that the abortion issue came with a fiscal note. With
a fiscal note. I know. I was rather fascinated that became a part of the issue. And it was an issue that nobody, when you saw the gazillion ads that were running about that, not one of them, that I ever saw at least, ever mentioned there's going to be taxpayer funding of abortions, very limited numbers, but still taxpayer funding of abortions. So, and that never came up.
2 years ago, Trump lost by 14. I think Trump lost here in Colorado by 12 this time, 11, 12.
Yeah.
So that means
pretty close.
Yeah. So in another 8 elections, he should be able to take Colorado.
I don't think he's going to live that long. Just saying.
The man's immortal. Watch out. Watch your words. My read on this, and let's wrap it up with this, that in Colorado, the boogeyman of Trump and abortion have been just a terrific thing for Democrats in the state, even though Colorado's laws have always been, even before Roe versus Wade, very pro-abortion. It wasn't an issue, but people don't remember that or don't think about that. So I'm wondering, does this put that issue to bed in Colorado? Can the abortion issue stop being the boogeyman?
Yes, for the Democrats, no for the Republicans. They will always continue to try to do something to overturn it. They may try to chip away at it. I mean,
they will always lose.
And they will always lose. But the whole reason that this got put on the ballot was because of fear that if Trump were to win the election, and he did, that there was going to be a national ban on abortions. This was to protect Colorado's and you have to love this. It's a states' rights issue, and
I do.
frankly, Trump has always said this should be left up to the states. That's what happened.
And he was very disciplined, surprisingly, during his campaign, not to come across as pro or anti-abortion, but to stick to it's up to the states.
Yeah.
And that's why we have these different laws. I see Trump in office for the next 4 years, a dysfunctional, god-awful Republican Party. And I don't care what you say about abortion, they're still going to go, it's abortion. I think Republicans are going to have a real uphill battle until Trump is out of office here in Colorado.
Oh, absolutely. He will always be a boogeyman who is good at generating turnout. Keep in mind, we've got a Senate race coming up in 2 years. John Hickenlooper is running for the Senate, and for his what he says is going to be his last term. And frankly, at his age, I actually believe it. Trump will be the boogeyman that will get cited as, you've got to send me back to Washington so I can do what I can to keep a lid on this guy.
That's a really good point. Any last thoughts? Any big surprises? Any weirdness?
Politics is always weirdness.
Weird.
That's what keeps me fascinated.
Was there a surprise winner in all of this?
No. That was the thing. There were
surprise losers, surprise losing issues and ballot questions, but
none of those actually surprised me. I could see the writing on the wall for the trophy hunting thing. I could see the writing on the wall maybe a week or so before the election, even on ranked choice voting. So this was sort of a non-surprising election, with the possible exception of what happened at the top.
And now the election season starts anew, starting today.
Oh, goody.
Oh, goody. Marianne, thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Always a pleasure.
No, we learn a lot from you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.